Anakin Skywalker was born to the slave Shmi Skywalker roughly 41 years before the Battle of Yavin. Anakin was conceived by the Force, and he would become the most powerful Force-sensitive to have ever existed. Anakin and his mother soon ended up as the property of the Toydarian Watto, and Skywalker exhibited exceptional piloting skills and a reputation for being able to build and repair anything, even at a young age. Skywalker would encounter the Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and Padme Amidala, and he helped them secure the parts they needed for their starship by winning the Boonta Eve Classic pod racing event. Skywalker would accompany Jinn and his group to the Republic's capital of Coruscant and participated in the Battle of Naboo, helping to free Amidala's homeworld from the armies of the Trade Federation. While Jinn was killed during the battle, Jinn's student Obi-Wan Kenobi followed Jinn's wishes and took on Skywalker as his Padawan, and much of the Jedi Council believed that Skywalker was the chosen one of Jedi prophecy, one who would bring balance to the Force by destroying the Sith Order. Skywalker and Kenobi had a number of adventures during Anakin's decade of training to become a Jedi, but as the Separatist crisis threatened to tear the Republic apart in 22 BBY, Skywalker would be present for the Battle of Geonosis, the beginning of the Clone Wars between the Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Losing an arm during the fighting, Skywalker received a cybernetic replacement, and he and Amidala were secretly married in the days after the battle, despite the Jedi Code's restrictions on romantic attachments. During the Clone Wars, Skywalker was granted the rank of Jedi Knight and became known to the public as the hero with no fear. Taking on the Togruta Ahsoka Tano as his apprentice, Skywalker fought alongside Kenobi and his fellow Jedi in scores of battles, and his friendship with Supreme Chancellor Palpatine deepened. Throughout the Clone Wars, Skywalker's anger and sense of loss pushed him ever closer to the dark side of the Force. Palpatine, who was in fact the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, manipulated Skywalker into becoming his apprentice, and Skywalker became the Sith Lord Darth Vader, as Palpatine transformed the Republic into the Galactic Empire and eradicated the Jedi Order. Vader and Kenobi would clash on Mustafar, and the newly christened Sith Lord was handed a crushing defeat at Kenobi's hands. Encased in a suit of life-sustaining black armor and believing his wife to be dead, Vader embraced his role as the Emperor's right hand and enforcer, hunting down Jedi survivors and enforcing the will of the Empire for years to come. Possibly the part of Grand Admiral Thrawn's secret Force-sensitive cloning program, Jaden Korr was born in the capital world of Coruscant 1 year after the Battle of Yavin. Discovered to be Force-sensitive at the age of 13, Jaden Korr received a vision that caused him to construct his first lightsaber out of spare parts, despite receiving no training up until this point. Jaden would soon be accepted into Luke Skywalker's Jedi Paraxium on Yavin 4 to begin his formal training. While there, Jaden would befriend the fellow student Rosh Penn. The two would be apprenticed to Jedi Battlemaster Kyle Katarn just in time for the Disciples of Ragnos to launch their attack on the New Republic. Jaden would lead the New Republic to victory by taking down most of the organization's key players, before rendering the entire Sith cult powerless after his defeat of the spirit of Mark Aragnos himself. Now a fully fledged Jedi Knight, Jaden would become one of the new Jedi Order's most esteemed Outer Rim field agents. Jaden would then prove his worth by surviving both the Yuuzhan Vong War and the Second Galactic Civil War. Jaden would soon grow uncomfortable with his power in the Force. Distressed by the previous two wars along with his unusual affinity for dark side Force powers, this mental state would impede Jaden's Force ability for a time. With the help of the smugglers Kadeen and Mar, Jaden would overcome this mental blockage, and after discovering Mar's Force sensitivity, would take him on as his apprentice. A complex series of events involving a 5,000-year-old warship full of Sith and one Jedi Master would result in Jaden discovering a batch of deranged clones grown from the genetic material of several prominent Force wielders. Realizing the potential damage that insane clones with powerful force abilities could cause, Jaden resolved to hunt the group down even as they attempted to escape into the unknown regions. Over the course of this hunt, Jaden would face off against the clones of Cam Solusar and Lumaya, along with a Rakatan force entity known as Mother. After this mission, Jaden would rejoin with the Jedi for their secret war against the lost tribe of the Sith, and would survive the conflict. His final fate remains uncertain. Hello YouTube, this is the Phoenix Exalt bringing you the next installment of my Versus series. For this analysis, I will be using Anakin Skywalker during the time frame of Revenge of the Sith, and Jaden Korr from the time frame of Fate of the Jedi. I will be pulling from Legends continuity along with any canon materials that do not directly interfere with previously made Legends materials. Due to the fact that the Disney Story Group is going in a direction that is neither original nor creative, I will not be using canon as the main point of Star Wars media for my videos. As for the 2008 show Star Wars The Clone Wars, which bridges both canon and Legends, I will be using the episodes and arcs for Anakin that do not contradict or diminish his feats elsewhere in the Star Wars lore. As always, I own none of the characters, art, music, or other media depicted in this video, and all rights to them go to their respective companies. With that out of the way, I present to you Anakin Skywalker versus Jaden Korr. If these two legendary Jedi met on the battlefield, who would be the victor? As noted by the Essential Guide to Alien Species, humans were the most populous species in the galaxy, an advanced race possessing highly evolved brains, advanced hardiness, and adaptability to sudden changes in an environment. At 22 years old, Anakin was an exceptional example of his species. Born into slavery and growing up on Tatooine, Anakin entered the Jedi Order already prepared for the labor-intensive lifestyle of a Jedi Knight. At the height of a human's physical prime, Anakin stood at a towering 6'2", with a strong build of a warrior. A veteran physical combatant with years of experience, Anakin would take his fair share of hits with facial dueling scars from Asajj Ventress and a prosthetic right arm, courtesy of Count Dooku. The prosthetic arm provided superior grip strength and can be used as an effective bludgeoning device. In regards to his baseline physical capabilities, Anakin was nothing short of superhuman. He would leverage his dexterity through high-velocity lightsaber duels, and his power blows were likened to a meteor strike. He would supplement these advantages with his agility, being able to keep pace with some of the fastest adversaries of his day. This physical output was only enhanced by his resilience and endurance, surviving the massacre at Geonosis, tanking a brush with Force lightning, and then proceeding to duel Dooku to almost a standstill. Against Ventress on Yavin 4, Anakin endured her telekinetic pummeling and overpowered her through strength and the Force, and the mere fact that he survived his defeat on Mustafar was a testament to his power and strength of will. A human male in his late 30s, Jaden was still in the physical prime for a Jedi. He possessed advanced hardiness along with high adaptability to sudden changes in his environment. Jaden has kept pace with council-level adepts along with boosting his reflexes to be able to deflect blaster bolts and force lightning. Although not one of the muscle tanks of his day, Korr's strength was impressive. He has strangled the Umbaran assassin Nyas Nin, sent armored humanoids flying with a single kick, along with going toe-to-toe with Alpha, the deranged clone of Cam Solusar, a feat made more impressive by Jaden's limited ability to draw on the Force at the time. During the fight with Alpha, Jaden would suffer the loss of 3 of his outermost fingers on his left hand. Jaden would note this injury did not compromise his ability to wield a lightsaber, and would choose to keep the injury as a constant reminder that doubt would always be the price he paid to be himself. Although shrugging off lightsaber strikes and blaster bolts is just a game mechanic, Jaden was able to take an almost inhuman amount of punishment, tanking bolts of force lightning and withstanding multiple bone-crushing punches and kicks. Jaden Korr's physicality was similar to that of Obi-Wan Kenobi, a damage sponge that would hit back hard if you let your guard down. This conclusion is easy to call. While Jaden Korr is an extremely impressive combatant, the fact remains that he is almost 2 decades older than Anakin, and at best on par with most of Anakin's feats. Even if I negate the age advantage and the close parity between Jaden and Anakin in terms of direct physical feats, Anakin has one advantage Jaden cannot compete with. Anakin's prosthetic right arm is an effective weapon in hand-to-hand engagements, with Skywalker being able to use it as an effective bludgeon that he cannot be disarmed of without literally being disarmed. Therefore, all Anakin has to do to win a hand-to-hand matchup is to leverage his right arm and stick it out, and there has been nothing shown by Jaden for me to believe he'd be capable of outlasting Skywalker in this regard. Anakin Skywalker gets the edge in physical abilities. Anakin Skywalker was a prodigy with the lightsaber, outstripping his peers within the first few years of formal training, and attaining a skill level of comparable power to the great masters of his era in half the time of those same masters. Where Anakin's Master Kenobi aimed for tactical viability and survivability with mastering Form 3 Surisu, Anakin was preoccupied with a quest for strength and power, and his chosen form of lightsaber combat would reflect this. Dedicating himself to the aggressive Form 5, Anakin would initially train in Xi'an, but as the Clone Wars raged, Anakin would dedicate himself to the Jem-So variant of Form 5. The Jem-So uses the opponent's momentum against them, pairing attacks in such a way that leaves their adversaries open to a strength-based counterattack. The form was often considered as an alternative to the pure defense of Surisu, and despite its strength-based heavy-handed nature, the Jem-So was a form that was well suited to marathon engagements. Anakin would take this strength-oriented art to such heights that Count Dooku, an uncompromising critic of Skywalker, would commend Anakin as the finest Jem-So stylist that he had ever seen. Anakin would couple his mastery of Form 5 with an advanced application of Ataru. Favoring the form for its dramatic flair, Ataru was the most acrobatic and physically demanding of all the classical forms of lightsaber combat. Categorized by both wild flourishes and acrobatics, along with the fluid integration of physical combat into lightsaber sequences, such sequences can be seen being employed by Anakin on numerous occasions during his depictions, along with Count Dooku confirming Skywalker as a practitioner of the form. Anakin also used Ataru to cover for the weaknesses of Jem-So. Because Form 5 was a grounded form, practitioners often had a lack of mobility, and so Anakin would use Ataru's acrobatics to avoid the common pitfalls of his form. Despite these attempts, Skywalker's grounded footwork would leave him exposed to physical combat techniques on occasion. Though the polar opposite of Kenobi in almost every aspect, Skywalker was no less influenced by his master than any other Jedi. Characterized by tight, efficient blade work that was excellent for both defense and counters, Anakin was blindingly fast and overwhelmingly powerful. Such a dedication to offense did create as many problems as it solved. While Anakin's hybridization of the Jem-So and Ataru was an impressive sight to behold, it left his defensive viability lacking. Anakin has shown to be subject to both overconfidence and a weakness for unexpected avenues of attack. Anakin's tactical mindset was reflective of his overall mentality. Far from a grand strategist, Skywalker was a frontline general who loved to be in the thick of the fighting, a Robert Baratheon that would always favor the direct approach. Despite the fact that Anakin would always have a large amount of options available to him, he would always take the suicidal gambit that had both the highest risk and the highest reward. Such a mentality was brought about due to the fact that Anakin viewed the swirling chaos of live combat as his idea of fun. Such an overt dedication to an all-out aggression meant that Anakin was guaranteed to be utterly dominate his adversary or be completely crushed by them, and all of his duels ended with one participant or the other suffering a traumatic amputation. Counted amongst the most prodigious field agents of his day, Jaden Korr was considered by Kyle Katarn to be the finest student he had ever trained. His renown was such that Darth Krayt's One Sith Order considered Jaden to be a serious threat to their plans. This is high praise considering the Sith's usual arrogance and sense of superiority. During the Disciple of Ragnos crisis, Jaden would best many reborn Sith cultists along with several prominent Dark Jedi. While many like to downplay this feat, as the vast majority of the cultists had Force abilities in the tier range of 5 to 6, the same entry that confirms their low affinity for the Force notes that the cultist's skill with the lightsaber compensates for their low Force potential. Jaden's most notable victory during the conflict was over the spirit of Marka Ragnos, who was possessing Tavion Aximus at the time. While it is likely that Ragnos could not draw on the same physical potential in the body of Aximus that he was able to in his real body, the official database does credit the possessed Aximus as wielding incredible power, and therefore this is not a victory to be taken lightly. Moving on to Korr's later appearances, Jaden easily matched the Old Republic Jedi Master Raylan Ruru, though he was injured at the time, along with the clones of Kyle Katarn and himself. Though Jaden would have significant difficulty with a clone of Cam Solusar, known as Alpha, this was heavily implied to be due to Jaden's connection to the Force being limited at the time, rather than a lack of skill. Next, Jaden was confronted by the Rakatan Force entity known as Mother, and while he did not properly defeat it, he was able to keep it off balance long enough for him to devise a plan to defeat it with his allies. As for the specifics of his style, Jaden's skill set was most heavily fleshed out in the video game Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, along with the novels Crosscurrent and Riptide. Jaden was a well-rounded combatant, possessing the standard Jedi in physical combat and Force ability training, along with marksmanship and unarmed combat. Upon his initial training, Kyle Katarn trained Jaden in Shi Cho along with strong, medium, and fast styles. Despite an equal proficiency in all 4 disciplines, Jaden was stated to have a preference for medium style. Medium style was a form of lightsaber combat that was designed to be an equal of both strength and speed, mixing the power blows of strong style with the swift strikes of fast style. The form would also stress the integration of physical combat techniques and Force abilities into the user's lightsaber sequences. Therefore, medium style can be most closely attributed to Form 6, Nyman, in terms of its basic function. Like Form 6, medium style was a hybridization of the other forms that contained both no apparent weaknesses and no apparent advantages. Jaden would use precise power blows to batter down his opponent's guard before executing them with a speed-based attack flurry or slash. His on and off usage of a blaster in combat hinted at some proficiency with Jar-Kai dual-weapon fencing, and this is only reinforced by Jaden's habit of carrying a second lightsaber on him in case of emergencies. As for his defensive capabilities, Jaden was simple yet effective. He is capable of easily deflecting blaster fire, along with an even deflecting a starship cannon blast. When engaging in other duelists, Jaden relied on tight conservative blocks to shunt aside incoming attacks, along with using the momentum from his opponent's power blows to redirect those he didn't want to meet head-on. However, Jaden was intelligent about his defense, and would avoid an incoming strike if he could with a deft evasion or an acrobatic leap. Having been trained during the era of the New Jedi Order, Jaden was in a learning environment that particularly emphasized the personalization of a combative technique. Once a trainee had mastered the Academy's basics, a student was encouraged to use advanced resources to further advance their style in whatever way they saw fit. Some of this can be seen by Jaden's habit of hiding a secondary lightsaber in the small of his back and dual-wielding a blaster and his primary lightsaber. Fellow YouTuber EvanNova95 has proposed a theory that Jaden had hybridized Forms 3, 4, and 5 and combined those with his previous academy training. This is an assessment that I agree with. Form 3 Srisu was a purely defensive form that maximized longevity and survivability by utilizing an entirely defensive stance. Form 4 Ataru was the most acrobatic and physically demanding form that focused on elaborate swordplay. Finally, Form 5 Djemso focused on immediately countering an opponent's attack with a powerful strength-based offensive. Evanova based this theory over Jaden's apprenticeship to Kyle Katarn, along with his observable attributes and his appearances. While I have mixed feelings about assuming that the same skills exhibited by a master would be passed down onto an apprentice, as there are many cases in which a master and apprentice have developed very differently combatively speaking, I do agree that Jaden's skill set very closely mirrored the three forms. In terms of tactics, Jaden preferred to analyze his opponent's skill set and tailor his style to his opponent's weaknesses. This allowed him to be dangerously unpredictable on the battlefield, and his saber offense could change dramatically depending on what his opponent was bringing to the table. All in all, Jaden Korr is an excellent combatant that was well on his way to being one of the great masters of his era. This conclusion is difficult to call. On the one hand, Anakin has more impressive direct feats to his name. It was Skywalker that kept pace with Dooku as a Padawan and killed the Count just 3 years later. It was Skywalker who defeated the Jedi killer Asajj Ventress on Yavin 4, and it was Skywalker that slaughtered the inhabitants of the Jedi Temple during Order 66. Anakin was undoubtedly the greatest master of Djemso of his era, and it showed in his lightsaber technique. However, Jaden has the more diverse skill set by far, and would know the weaknesses of Djemso due to his own study of the form. Anakin has also never faced an opponent that would have a style as personalized as Jaden's, with all of Anakin's opponents being masters of the classical forms, many of whom did not deviate from their chosen skill set. Where Anakin crumbles is usually when his opponent forces him on the defensive, and I have not seen from Jaden the necessary skills that would allow him to do so reliably, at least without force abilities. That being said, I also have not seen from Anakin an ability to deal with the completely unorthodox, and though this is likely because Anakin has never fought a combatant like Jaden, this does not necessarily mean that he wasn't weak to such methods of attack. Additionally, it should be noted that Darth Vader, for all his power and skill, would struggle the most against combatants that brought the fight to him in unexpected ways, due to there being no conclusive advantage in the realm of martial skill, with any contest between the two decided through circumstantial factors as much as anything else. I proclaim Anakin Skywalker and Jaden Korr equals in the terms of lightsaber dueling. Anakin Skywalker was the most powerful Force-sensitive to have ever existed in galactic history. Birthed by the Force itself, Anakin's power allowed him to quickly catch up and surpass his peers despite his lack of training. However, despite this power, Skywalker was far from the most powerful Force user in the galaxy. While it is true that Anakin had a greater potential than any other Force user, including the likes of Darth Sidious and even his son Luke Skywalker, Anakin would never reach this level of power. He would choose instead to coast on natural talent, and while this talent did allow him to be one of the most powerful Force users in galactic history, he would never achieve the godlike powers of his son or his future master Darth Sidious. As a trainee, he was the most talented student of his generation, and wielded powers that his contemporaries could only hope to learn in the years to come. Anakin would never fully accept the Jedi philosophy, never holding a proper reverence for the Force as the Jedi Code would dictate. As for his powers, Anakin was a master of physical augmentation, having a limited ability to use it even before his Jedi training began, being able to instinctively enhance his Jedi reflexes to fly pod racers and starfighters. Jedi training would add to this by enhancing his speed and strength, both of which would be used to great effect during combat. Skywalker was of the philosophy that the best defense was a good offense, and as such would channel most of his power into offensive telekinesis. His lifting strength was easily in the multi-ton range. Individual force pushes would stagger and thrash his opponents, force waves to scatter groups of enemies, and force throws to turn anything not bolted down into a lethal projectile. With a particular favoritism for the lightsaber throw, whenever operating away from the Jedi Council's prying eyes, Anakin would often utilize force grip, either throttling the life out of a target or simply crushing the rib cages. Despite Anakin's unstable mental state, he was a capable telepath. Anakin was capable of using the Force to augment his screams, in one case causing a large building to come crashing down, nearly killing himself. Capable of using the mind trick on large crowds, along with the beast control ability. Though never stated outright, it is highly implied that Anakin also has an ability with Mekuduru. Mekuduru allows its user to sense the inner workings of technology, and Anakin has shown this off by building droids, modifying his starfighters, and improving his own prosthetic hand. Despite the fact that Anakin would often dominate his various lightsaber duels through his usage of the Force, he operated as a lightsaber combatant first and foremost, and would use his powers only as a supplement. He would also use his powers in a reactionary fashion, not because he was unwilling to use them, but rather they were not his first instinct. Skywalker would much rather physically overpower an opponent through greater martial skill, rather than overwhelm them through the Force, the best example being that he only ragdolled Barriss Offee after their duel when it became too much effort to simply overpower her through greater martial skill. Jaden Korr was one of the most powerful Force wielders of his day, and like the vast majority of his New Jedi Order contemporaries, was overshadowed by the fact that he lived in an era of some of the most powerful Jedi Masters in galactic history. That being said, even within the New Jedi Order, Jaden was a special case. Jedi Master Raylan Drew noted that Jaden's Force signature was so powerful that it would likely be impossible to hide it from the Sith Lord Seiss Rugen, and while Mark Aragnos was initially dismissive of Jaden, he would proclaim him a true Jedi after his defeat. Jaden's view of the Force seemed to be heavily influenced by his master Kyle Katarn, who shared with him the belief that the Force was a tool, with no true light or dark side. Though reluctant to accept this view of the Force, Jaden would eventually balance the two realms of the Force that resided within him. After he completed his initial training, Jaden would delve deep into the Force and pick up a large variety of skills. Jaden's ability with physical augmentation was prodigious, showing off the superhuman physical feats common to all Jedi. Unlike many Jedi, Jaden would have an ability with Force lightning, and would use it whenever the situation demanded it. This lightning was proven to be just as deadly as those casted by the Lords of the Sith, and Jaden showcased the rare ability to chain lightning through multiple opponents. As for defense, Jaden has an ability with both Force protection and Force absorption, using the latter to funnel attacks from Mark Aragnos into his own power. Though not an expert Jedi healer, Jaden has shown an ability to use the Force to soothe his muscles in the midst of combat and recover from battles quicker. Korr was a capable telepath, using it to compel opposing soldiers to attack their allies, and forming mental bonds to communicate feelings and emotions over long distances. He has also showcased strong telepathic defenses, being able to resist probes by the dark side of the Force. Jaden has shown an exceptional ability with the Sense branch of Force powers, sussing out a group of cloaked adversaries and keeping track of Nias Nin, despite the Umbaran's ability to sever a target's connection to the Force. Next, we move on to Jaden's telekinetic abilities. His lifting strength was in the multi-ton, and he could manipulate large objects to allow for an optimal battlefield. Similarly to the clone of Galen Merrick, Jaden has released force waves powerful enough to atomize the corpses of his adversaries, a feat made more impressive by the fact that Jaden accomplished this instantly and without any noticeable drain on his reserves. He has shown a mastery of the saber throw to take unaware enemies off guard, and shock waves to clear debris and groups of adversaries. Jaden has shown a reliable ability to penetrate the telekinetic defenses of opposing force wielders, and even council-level adepts. As for his defensive skill set, he has consistently parried force blows from council-level attacks, and was able to break free from the telekinetic grasps. All in all, Jaden Korr was a very powerful force wielder, and one that would not go down without a fight. I'm going to preface this category's verdict by reminding that the Force Abilities category only applies to a Force-only duel, with no physicality and no lightsabers in play. Now on to the verdict. Despite the fact that Anakin never realized his full potential, one might be inclined to give Anakin the edge anyway, due to the sheer power he can draw upon, along with his limitless Force reserves. However, I believe that Jaden has proven that his power can at least contend with Anakin's raw power, with greater developed skill on Jaden's part. Additionally, Jaden has a much larger array of Force abilities at his disposal. While Anakin's telekinetic powers are a sight to behold, Jaden has achieved similar feats, along with having Force lightning at his disposal. While it is true that Anakin, by this point, knows how to deal with Force lightning, the fact remains that if Anakin was deprived of his weapon, for whatever reason, he would be unable to defend against it in any meaningful way. Next, we have the possibility that Anakin will become enraged due to his duel with Jaden, and draw on a larger potential of his full potential. This is not a particularly far-fetched scenario given that Anakin has done so in the past. However, Jaden would not exactly be defenseless. As previously stated, Jaden's active barrier was already council level, and so it would take a considerable amount of power on Anakin's part to override this defense. While I will concede that it is possible for Anakin to draw on this level of power, the fact remains that Anakin has never been shown doing so on a regular and consistent basis. And so, while Anakin could theoretically simply ragdoll Jaden and choke the life out of him, there is little evidence to suggest that he would do so. Therefore, Jaden Korr gets the edge in Force abilities. Anakin Skywalker is armed with the most recognizable lightsaber in all of Star Wars media. The weapon would be passed down to his son, who would eventually give the weapon to his future wife, Mara Jade, who would carry it until her death. Afterwards, Luke would retire the weapon from service. Powered with a blue Ilum crystal, the hilt was crafted for the rigors of war, but provided no special features beyond familiarity with his own handiwork. Jaden Korr has wielded 3 lightsabers during his time as a Jedi, the last of which sported a yellow blade. While Jaden, for much of his career, carried his original lightsaber on the small of his back, he would give the weapon to his apprentice Mar, and it is unknown if the weapon was ever returned. Presuming that Mar kept the weapon, Jaden would carry only one lightsaber for this matchup. This weapon was a standard lightsaber with no special benefits. However, Jaden also carries a DL-44 blaster pistol, similar to the one that Han Solo wields. This blaster was known for its reliability and trustworthiness. While Anakin is more than capable of deflecting blaster fire, the fact that Jaden possesses a weapon in addition to his standard blade gives him more options in a contest, and therefore the edge in weapons and equipment. And now, the verdict. And if any viewers are surprised by the change in the verdict style, please check out my last video, Kyle Katarn vs Darth Malak, for a fuller explanation. For this fight, let's say it takes place in the hangar of Booster Tarek's Star Destroyer, the Errant Venture, with multiple loose objects of various sizes for the combatants to use. Additionally, let us assume that for the purpose of this fight, neither combatant recognizes the other, because one or both combatants recognizing each other would cause an uneven playing field. Additionally, neither combatant will have time to prepare for the battle, and the fight will start with both combatants in full view of each other. As the final tally for this matchup, I see the victor winning 6 times out of 10. This will be a description of one majority victory. Let us begin. For the early fight, I see neither side gaining an advantage. While Anakin's saber offense is incredibly strong, it is nothing that Jaden cannot contend with. Jaden may decide to break out his Force abilities, but given that Anakin has a lightsaber, I doubt there would be any quick victory to be had by Jaden's Force lightning. Anakin would obviously be the aggressor, fighting hard and fast to overwhelm Jaden through superior physical might. Though, given that Jaden could withstand Alpha's barrage, I do not see Jaden crumbling under Anakin's assault so easily. Jaden would likely adopt a defensive stance and begin to get a read on Anakin's style, adjusting his own technique to best counter Anakin's. While it is possible that Anakin could spam his Force abilities and possibly overwhelm Jaden through sheer volume and power, he has never been shown doing so, and therefore I find such an outcome unlikely. The mid-fight will likely see Jaden's personalized technique start to show its advantages. Anakin's power blows would be evaded instead of deflected. Jaden would recognize Anakin's strengths as being his physical prowess and saber offense, and instead of attempting to passively respond to Anakin's attacks, Jaden would be looking to turn the tables on the younger Jedi. However, I find it unlikely that Jaden would be able to do so easily, and instead would have to rely on his Force abilities to make space with Anakin while he worked around Anakin's saber guard. Anakin would grow increasingly frustrated by Jaden's change of pace, and would keep on his relentless series of power attacks aimed at cleaving Jaden in two. The late fight would see Anakin's weaknesses exploited. While Anakin would ramp up his saber offense, Jaden would continue to work around it, using the Force to off-balance Anakin or land his own attacks. Jaden would start to fluidly integrate more and more of his Force abilities into his attack sequences, likely exploiting Anakin's physical weak points, those being his agility and lack of defensive viability. Jaden would likely begin edging Anakin on into more and more aggressive states of mind before getting an advantage over Anakin. Perhaps Jaden would off-balance Anakin through a Force-enhanced blow that disrupts his attack sequences. Perhaps Jaden will manage to goad Anakin into a foolish decision such as what Obi-Wan accomplished on Mustafar. Or perhaps one of Jaden's Force abilities will force Anakin on the defensive where Jaden can ramp up his attack sequences and cut the young Jedi down. Either way, I see the late fight ending with a victory for Jaden. And thus, I declare Jaden Korr the victor. I'm sure many of you might be wondering why I gave the victory to Jaden and not Anakin, so before you write your dissenting opinion, allow me to explain myself. First off, I think that it is undeniable that Anakin managed to survive much of the Clone Wars through either plot armor or Palpatine's intervention. While yes, Anakin did achieve many things on his own, as both Ventress and Dooku were aiming to kill him during their respective final engagements. Anakin was often bailed out of bad situations by Palpatine, however, such as the evacuation of Jabim, as Palpatine did not want his prized apprentice to be killed over a fake war. Moving on to Anakin's engagements with Dooku, it should be noted that Dooku had been under explicit instructions to take Anakin's alive, and during their final duel on the Visible Hand, Dooku had even been instructed to throw the fight after he killed Kenobi. This makes it clear to me that I should not count Anakin's regular engagements with Dooku in the Clone Wars TV series as serious fights, as Dooku would likely be under strict orders from Palpatine to not kill Skywalker. This does not discredit Anakin's last duel against Dooku, but it is worth mentioning all the same. Next, the logistics of their lightsaber forms must be brought up. There is absolutely nothing that Anakin is bringing to the table that Jaden is not already well versed in. Jaden was taught by Kyle Katarn, a master of the 7 classical forms, along with the New Jedi Order's new curriculum. Considering that for this analysis, I am presuming the assumptions about Jaden's chosen forms are indeed correct, this would suggest that Anakin's Djemso and Ataru would be easily recognized and picked apart by Jaden. Any elements of Form 3 that might creep into Anakin's style from Kenobi would likewise be picked up on by Jaden. Anakin, on the other hand, would have very little to go on going into this fight. Already, Anakin has the disadvantage of not doing the same as Jaden, and analyzing his opponent and changing his approach to best suit the situation. Therefore, no matter what Jaden does, Anakin will plow ahead like a freight train and slam into Jaden with everything he has. Jaden has proven that he can deal with overbearing power duelists such as Alpha, and while yes, Alpha is definitely not at the same skill level as Anakin, it should be noted that Jaden was operating under a limited capacity to draw on the Force, along with a poor mental state at the time. Therefore, it is somewhat reasonable to assume that Jaden at his full power and a clear head would be able to at least contend with Anakin. The next pitfall for Anakin comes in the way of his unstable mental state. It does not take much to make Anakin angry, but when he becomes enraged, he will dig deep and fight even harder. This served Anakin well against Dooku, as his Form 5 was a natural counter to Dooku's Form 2, which, coupled with the Count's advanced age, leads to a decisive victory for Anakin. However, it should be noted that even with all these advantages, Dooku nearly succeeded against Skywalker by getting inside his head and playing on his fears. And had Palpatine not intervened with a mid-combat pep talk, Skywalker would have lost the day. Anakin's mentality leads him to fight harder, not smarter. When his opponent can't handle the increased pressure, this is a good thing for Anakin, as showcased by his victories over Dooku, Barriss Offee, and Ventress. However, an opponent capable of circumventing his onslaught by way of evasion, or simply an excellent defense, Anakin is left dangerously exposed. And in my opinion, when this is coupled with Jacen's diverse and unpredictable fighting style, I predict that a fight between the two would play out somewhat akin to the duel between Skywalker and Kenobi on Mustafar, with the notable difference that instead of Kenobi allowing the Force to lead him to an advantageous position, Jaden would actively create one and cut Skywalker down. With that out of the way, I would like to thank you all for watching the 10th episode of the Versus series. Please keep in mind that this is all my opinion of a hypothetical matchup, and feel free to leave comments, criticisms, or suggestions for future matchups in the comments down below. As a reminder, I will be taking suggestions for future Season 2 matchups, and these suggestions can be in the form of a specific matchup, or simply a character you would like to see me use. Thanks to the current fan input, I have almost run out of spots for next season, so get those suggestions in quick. Those of you that suggest a matchup that is featured will receive a shoutout at the beginning of the video. And yes, if you suggest a matchup that is already being suggested or I've already decided on, you will still receive credit. This is the Phoenix Exalt, signing out, and may the Force be with you, always.